Hello there, this is Jay Frost speaking to you from a bit of an echo chamber here in a hotel room of Athens, Georgia. I'm here for the APRA Georgia conference, which I'll be speaking at tomorrow. So a shout out to all my friends in the prospect development community. But of course, today is all about you, and this is the How to Raise show, part of the Philanthropy Mastermind series, brought to you, of course, by our friends at DonorSearch. And this show is, of course, a way for you to not only learn what you need to know in fundraising, but from the best in the field, including our presenter today, but also a way for you to gather up those CFRE credits. So whether you're here with us live or you're watching this afterwards, I hope you'll gather those towards your accreditation if that's what you're seeking to do. But at a minimum, I know that you will benefit from what we're going to cover today, which of course is Asking Styles 101, building donor relationships through your key strengths. If you don't know what I'm talking about here and you found yourself just stumbling into this session, I know you will be pleased that you did so. If you are familiar with Brian Saber's work, our presenter today, I know you'll be even more happy to be hearing from him today. This is something he's been working on for a long time. He has several books that tackle this subject from different perspectives about making sure that the style that you have, the personality type that you have, that framework, it can enable you to be a much better fundraiser, not only for you and for your institution, but arguably for all the donors that you have the opportunity to talk to. So today is all about that. But before I give Brian a proper introduction, I want to make sure to welcome you to the conversation. You can participate actively if you're with us live in either the chat or the Q&A. But let's go ahead and warm up that chat right now so that our presenter knows that you're here, and he will be able to talk with you and involve you in the conversation. It'll be really important to his presentation and also to have some context for who he's talking to and where you are. So if you would just go ahead and say hello, maybe, and which part of the country or the world that you're from, perhaps which organization you're with, what you do there, any of those things would be really instructive for him and great for your peers in the room with you. So Jessica, thank you for starting the chat right there. It's great to see you from Berlin, Maryland, which is not far from where I usually live, I find myself. But there we go. So, oh, and Michael, thank you very much. Good to see you from Tampa. And Lee, there in Chattanooga. Oh, yes. I'll be in Tennessee tomorrow. And then, let's see, Alicia, also in Ottawa. Great to see our friends in Canada. Let me see, Rami and Clayton and Jessica. It's good to see you all here. Thank you very much for joining us live. Of course, keep that space open for your conversation, but also potentially to engage in the conversation Brian is going to be having with you starting in just a moment. There are usually two questions, though, that people ask, and I want to answer them up front. First is, can you get a recording of this? And the answer is absolutely yes. So all of our recordings in the Philanthropy Mastermind series are made available for you over on the DonorSearch website, which is at donorsearch.net. That's the site of our sponsor. And there, under the resources tab, you'll see dozens, if not hundreds, of these episodes. We have 650 total plus, actually. And so all of those for the last 2 years are available for you there, as well as on their YouTube channel. Additionally, you will be receiving an email in the next couple of days, which has a link to the recording. And depending upon our presenter's preferences, there may be a slide deck as well, which he can either share with you directly or we can share with you. But I'll leave that to him to tell you how he wants to tackle that in just a moment. I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, DonorSearch. If you're not familiar with their work, you won't learn much about them today, but don't go away. First of all, I'm very appreciative of the fact that they have continued sponsoring the series now in our 10th year. And we've had people like Brian, who has been here with us more than twice to share with you. And I'm so grateful that they have been doing that with us and with you for this 10-year period and for the foreseeable future as well. If you want to know more about your donors or the people who are likely to be your donors in the future, I hope you'll check them out. Not only are they a generous company, but they really know their stuff. So you can learn all about them at donorsearch.net. But with no further ado, I want to welcome Brian Saber, a friend and a friend of the field, the man behind, of course, the Asking Styles, the company Asking Matters, the best baritone in the business, among other things. Brian, thank you so much for being here and for sharing once again today.
Thank you, Jay. Actually, that's the first time someone has has referred to me as the best baritone in the business. I'm here blushing over that, but that's very sweet. I am delighted to be here. Actually, I think this is the sixth time that I have presented on your platform. And I love doing so because Jay, you are a great member of our community, longstanding member, and as the days go by, I'm more and more appreciative for all the people in our field and for the great work we do, often against great odds. So, welcome, Asking Styles. Yes, this is what I've lived and breathed for 15 years. I spent my first 25 years as a frontline fundraiser, never thinking I would be one. As a matter of fact, if anyone on today grew up saying, gee, I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up, please type that in the chat box. Once in a blue moon, someone says they did. But for most of us, we fall into this field because we want to make a difference. Oh, we're going to help in education or social service or the arts or whatever. And then, as with me, someone asks us to help with fundraising. In my case, actually, I became the executive director of a very small organization. As a matter of fact, I'd love it if you could type in the chat box what your position is and your organization. That would be great. We often get a lot of executive directors here because we're thrown into fundraising, often with no experience whatsoever, and we've got to figure it out. And that's what happened to me. And it turned out I was good at it, and I ended up doing it again and again and again. So let's see, what do we have? Executive director, welcome, Jessica, philanthropy officer, community, and of course they're going to fly by faster than I can see them, but I see we have a mix of fundraising staff and executive staff. Perhaps we have a board member on today. All of us are doing this work because we care, not because it was the number one thing we wanted to do in our lives. And I think it's important to be honest about that. This is not easy work, and we have to figure out a way in. I, in particular, have struggled. Yes, that is me. That is me. That's my fourth book. What Asking Matters helped me understand, and the asking styles we developed, is my introversion. And we're going to be talking about extroversion, introversion today, and how that impacted the work I did and the value I actually did bring to the field. And we're going to walk through all those stereotypes and such. But the important thing here, and Jay underscored it, is that our field is about relationships. And I spend most of my time with I have over the years on individual gifts, but I've also built relationships with foundation directors, with corporate marketing heads or CEOs who are directing their funds, with government agencies, and in truth, wherever we're talking about some sort of significant gift, there's a one-on-one relationship because people give to people, and that means our personality is so important to that. So it was within that framework we developed the asking styles, which we're going to get into in a minute. So we're going to go through the styles so that you all understand them, and then I'm going to share how they impact us each step of the way in what I would call this donor process, from figuring out who to cultivate and solicit, to how we make the case for that, how we set up meetings, walk through meetings. I'm even going to touch on boards and asking styles because they're rather relevant. So we've got a great agenda for you. I hope you will ask questions along the way. I will try to look at the chat as I'm going along. I've got it in front of me, and Jay will be looking at the chat and the Q&A in case you put questions in there, but I hope you will participate. So let's talk about these asking styles. So when they were developed 15 years ago, they came out of this idea that there are many ways to do things. There are many ways to be effective and many ways to ask. There are absolutely best practices. I'll talk about a few of what I think are the most important best practices. But because we're building relationships with people, and everyone is different, it means that every relationship's going to be different. And if we tell you there is absolutely one way to do absolutely everything, it just doesn't make sense. It would only make sense if we were robots. And one day we may all be replaced by them, but for now have not been. So we thought, and I say we, and I always give a nod to Andrea Kielstedt. She was my co-founder. Many of you know her from the Capital Campaign community. She and I developed Asking Matters and the Styles together, and we thought, well, what are the two characteristics that most impact someone's asking style? The very obvious one is this extroversion versus introversion dichotomy. And it's the one where we find the greatest stereotypes. You know, people, as a matter of fact, from the entertainment sector, let's say, type in the name of someone you think is a big extrovert. Who do you think is a big extrovert among people we would know well? Who do you think is a big extrovert? While you're doing that, Jim Carrey. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one, Kristen. Jim Carrey. Yes. And perhaps he is, though I will share that it turns out lots of actors are introverts and they just have a certain personality when they're out there on stage. We tend to think extroversion means taking up a lot of space. I see Trump will avoid politics for today as much as we can, but people who are always out there grabbing for attention, want to talk all the time, interact all the time, and so forth. And that introverts must be like Shrek, hermetically sealed, never socializing. Not true at all. Introverts can be social. It just has to do with how we do it, because it has to do with where we derive our energy. Now, what's so interesting is um, there's nature and nurture, right? And there turns out to be a lot of nature in this. When I wrote this book on introverts, I did a lot of research and found out all sorts of scientific wonky things. I won't share them all with you, but suffice it to say that that introverts have longer neural pathways. And when introverts are trying to figure out an answer to something, they go deeper into their history, into their knowledge base, and take more time to process that answer before sharing it, which means we think to talk. We tend to stop. It could be 1 second, but it's a difference before talking. Whereas extroverts talk to think, they process out loud. They do a lot of their thinking out loud as opposed to quietly internally. And that's going to impact the rhythm of a conversation, right? We're either talking or we're listening, and how fast is the conversation going? So introverts, because we have to do more processing to answer those questions, we use a lot more energy. The extroverts derive energy, whereas we use our energy from being with people. So we tend to need to refuel more often. There's also a piece about dopamine and acetylcholine. Everyone's heard of dopamine. Only people who took chem bio or whatever know acetylcholine. But these are these enzymes, and it turns out that extroverts are more sensitive to the dopamine, which is the external reward enzyme, and introverts are more responsive to the acetylcholine, which means from internal rewards, that they get rewards from what they're feeling internally. So we are who we are, and that causes us to be what seems to be more or less extroverted. Now, the second one is an easier dichotomy. That's this analytic versus intuitive. And I'm sure you've heard some of this in other personality rubrics like Myers-Briggs, DISC, Enneagram. This was developed specifically from scratch for us, but they all have a similar sensibility, right? So this one is about whether we first find the facts and then come up with an idea based on the facts that we found, or if we've got an idea in mind and then we see if the data supports it, analytic versus intuitive. And this is going to impact why you love your organization in the first place, and we're going to get to that, and how you would share that with others. How do you tell your story? It's going to be significantly different based on whether you're an analytic or an intuitive. When we put them together, we get the four asking styles. So I'm going to run through them, talk about the key traits of each, and then I'm going to ask you to share in the questions box in the chat box, excuse me, which one you think is your primary asking style. And we say primary because no one fits cleanly in one box. You'll see as we go through these, you have a little bit of all of the identifiers I'm going to share. But let's see. We start with the rainmaker. When people think fundraiser, they think rainmaker, this analytic extrovert who's very goal-oriented and competitive, going to get to the end, going to accomplish something, driven, uses a lot of analysis to figure out what to do, right? Very strategic in how they move about, doesn't get easily sidetracked. And these are great skills for fundraising where it can be challenging and we have to continuously push forward and figure out how to bring our donors closer to us and so forth. But then we have our go-getters, our intuitive extroverts, who are the big picture thinkers, life of the party. They're creative. They get people excited about the organization through their own energy. They make friends easily. They love meeting new people. Great skills for fundraisers, different key core skills than those of the rainmaker. Then we get our kindred spirit. I'm a kindred spirit, classic kindred spirit, intuitive introvert. We are feelings oriented. We tend to wear our hearts on our sleeves. We tend to be sensitive. Finally, at ripe old age at 62 and a half, I have decided I will just always be a sensitive soul. I try and rein it in where I can, but I walk through the world emotionally. Now, because we introverts tend to be a little more sensitive ourselves, we also are often more aware of others, how they are feeling, what they're sensing. So we tend to be thoughtful towards others, maybe a little more caring about them, more selfless towards them. And that helps us, of course, build relationships by being able to cater to our donors. Now, this is not to say a rainmaker can't be caring or that a kindred spirit can't be strategic, but where's our strength? Where's our core? And the fourth is the mission controller, the analytic introvert, the Eagle Scout who always gets the job done, methodical, systematic, loves lots of data before making a decision, and observant. Now, if you've been in the business a while, you probably know that the number one skill in fundraising is listening, the ability to listen. I do a lot of work teaching fundraisers how to talk less and ask more questions and listen and learn, because that is much more important actually than sharing everything we know about our organization and love about it, but everything but the kitchen sink. So mission controllers are great observers and listeners, because they'd much rather sit back and observe than do the talking. There's another way I look at the asking styles, and it's through the question each of us asks when we're trying to figure out, well, what's important to us? So the rainmaker is looking in the future, and it's got to be something analytic and quantitative. Yes, we're going to run this capital campaign and raise $1 million. We're going to close 10 new gifts this year. I'm going to make 4 new contacts, because the rainmaker relies on those analytics when deciding whether something has succeeded or not. The go-getter is also looking in the future, but more broadly. Well, what can the opportunity be? What can we make happen if we're successful? The kindred spirit is looking internally and saying, well, what does my heart say we should do? Right? I'm going to move in that direction based on what I'm feeling. And the mission controller says, that's all fine and good, everyone, but what's the plan? Without a plan, how can we reach our goal? Without a plan, how can we take advantage of that opportunity? And frankly, if there isn't a plan to support it, I appreciate how you feel, but it isn't going to help us. So type in the chat box, what do you think your primary asking style is? What do you think your primary asking style is? Let's see, go-getter, kindred spirit, mission controller, kindred spirit, go-getter. Lots of kindred spirits on today, mission controllers. So Marla's saying a combo of go-getter and kindred spirit. And what you're getting at there is the fact that we do have a primary and a secondary, as I alluded to. So you're saying go-getter kindred spirit, which means your intuitive is more dominant relative to your analytic than your extroversion is relative to your introversion. I'm a kindred spirit mission controller. My introversion is actually dominant, and people don't think I am because here I am presenting all the time. But like an actor, I am putting on a presentation and I'm speaking about my expertise. But as I joke when I present in public, I'm much more comfortable being up there at the podium than I am when people come up to me afterwards at the podium. Um, and Paul says more important than the individual style is the reality. If you don't ask, you don't get. Don't ask, don't get. Very funny you say that. I have these mottos we developed when we started. One of them is don't ask, don't get. At the end of the day, we all have to ask. We do it in different ways. So one of the beauties of the styles is that it helps us figure out who we might partner with, or at the very least, how that partnership might work out. So type in the chat box someone you partner with in your fundraising work, either your executive director or director of development, a board member, another fundraising staff person. And you can give either the first name or the position or something. And then I want you to think, so ideally, if we had our druthers, we would probably ask, okay, and that is the first time I got director of paleontology as an answer. Kristen, that is very specific. So you're obviously supporting that work. Ideally, we are matching diagonally because then we're covering all the bases. So as a kindred spirit, if I find a rainmaker to go cultivate and solicit with me, I've got the extrovert and I've got the analytic. Especially, actually, since I'm secondarily mission controller, if the person's rainmaker go-getter, then we're really well matched. We've got it all covered. And I say that's helpful because we don't we often don't know everything we need to know about our donors. We also don't have um, uh, necessarily the option of who we go with. So we have to figure out, well, what are we bringing to the table? If we happen to be bringing someone who is our opposite and we don't know the donor, well, if the donor turns out to be someone who's asking a lot of outcomes and goals related questions, our analytic can take over. And if someone's looking for the touchy-feely story, maybe the intuitive does, and so forth. And the extrovert might be good at keeping that conversation going, the introvert better at listening. Depending on who the donor is, and yes, donors have asking styles, we don't cover them here, but whoever you meet with is going to fall into one of these boxes. So you can ask yourself, oh, well, look, I'm a go-getter and my CEO is a rainmaker, and we're going to see a mission controller. What does that mean for the meeting? One thing it might mean actually is that we need to pull back a little bit because as extroverts, we might overwhelm it. So a really great exercise is how might these styles impact how you work together? And for those of you who chose someone, or if you haven't yet, just thinking of someone in mind, if you could type in what's one thing you think about now through the lens of the styles and yourself, and maybe the style you think your the person you fundraise with is, how do you think that might impact how you work together, knowing that? What's something you may have just learned about yourself and this person through these asking styles? So type that in. While you're doing that, I'll share that I often, let's say I'm talking to an executive director, um, the executive director says, now I understand why my board chair keeps asking these questions or wanting this information or running things in a certain way, whereas I might do them differently. Or, now I see why, right? So Kristen's saying need to pair with a kindred spirit. Um, kindred kindred to the donor, kindred to the donor. Um, so right now, understanding who the donor is might change who you partner with, or at least how you approach that situation. So we don't have a lot of time for exercises like this during a webinar, but this is a great exercise just to bring back to your office, or an exercise to do just one-on-one when you are either, if you yourself are going out to see a donor and you have a sense of the donor style, to think through how is this impacting the rhythm, what would be the rhythm of the conversation, or if I have a partner, how might we work together based on our asking styles? A lot of power in it. There is a quiz. It's free to everyone. I encourage you and everyone on your team to take it. Later in the webinar, we'll talk about boards and the dynamic and how understanding those styles helps. But you can go to quiz.askingmatters.com. It's 30 true false questions, and you'll get an answer immediately on the screen and an email, and it will give you your primary and your secondary and what some of your strengths and challenges are. It's a great tool that's been empowering people in the field for more than a decade, and I hope you'll use it as well. I've found it particularly effective with boards and in board training and board discussions, because board members don't have the day-to-day experience we have in fundraising. They want to help, and they need a way in, and sometimes this is the way in for them. And thank you, Jack, for giving the link to that quiz. So now let's apply them, right? Because the truth is, all of us can be fundraisers. Now, one of the things I found interesting is, unless I missed it, no one said they were a rainmaker. And now, obviously, in society, we would assume if our quiz is balanced, that a quarter of all people are in one of these boxes. There is randomness with a small group. We may not have a critical mass and such. But the bottom line is, if everyone thought the rainmaker was the key fundraiser, that's their description of a fundraiser, then none of us on today could be fundraisers. And obviously that's not true. And we've been having a lot of discussions lately. I mean, these are extraordinarily difficult times for nonprofits, right? We are facing an administration that is not a fan of nonprofits and is barreling through. There's been a lot of pain in our field, and we must respect everyone in the field and get away from our own stereotypes in terms of who can do this work or not, and really respect and support everyone's strengths and ability to build relationships and fundraise. So let's apply this to a couple of steps in the process. So there are, in selecting prospects, meaning who are we going to go out and cultivate and ask, there are some best practices. Now, Kim Klein of Grassroots Fundraising years ago came up with this, and I like it, the ABCs: ability, belief, and contact. Of course, someone has to have the ability to make a gift at whatever level you consider a major gift level. I was talking about major gifts yesterday with someone. A major gift isn't necessarily endowing a building or a scholarship or something like that. It's a gift worth your time and money to cultivate and solicit. If you have a threshold, type that in the chat box. What's the minimum gift generally, in terms of current gift or a potential, at which you give personal attention in terms of cultivating, educating, and so forth? Is that 5,000? I hear 5,000 a lot. It could be 1,000 if you're a younger, smaller organization. Could be less than that. It really varies depending on the size of your organization, the size of your list, the depth of that list. So first, someone's got to reach that ability. Second, they have to have belief. Even the wealthiest donors don't support every organization, every sector. As a matter of fact, wealthier people often are more specific. They say, I'm covering education, I'm covering environment, I'm covering social welfare, etc. And then, of course, we have to have contact. And whenever I am talking to a board of directors, I underscore this one, because we know as staff that well-meaning board members are always telling us who the rich people are in our community, as if we don't know who they are. And we do know who they are, we just don't have contact. We must have contact. But then we layer on top of that our asking style. In terms of either selecting or understanding the relationship. So this is particularly important for boards. And I bring up boards a lot because all of us, unless we're in major organizations with hundreds of major gift officers, like universities, hospitals, the largest arts organizations and such, or the largest social service organizations, a place like Save the Children or Greenpeace or whatever, we're asking our board members to be pretty involved in fundraising. And I think in particular for them, we need to be sensitive to the types of donors they will be more comfortable with because, again, they don't have uh, our experience. We're dealing with this all the time, and then we're asking them a limited number of times a year to be involved in this process. So for rainmakers love top dollar prospects because it's that challenge of closing a big gift. And they like new prospects for the challenge of seeing if they can convert them to donors. And also because they're extroverts. They're comfortable meeting new people, just like go-getters. Go-getters are fine with their friends. They think, the more the merrier. I'm going to cast the net wide. Kindred spirits, likely to say yes. No one likes rejection. Kindred spirits take it personally. So maybe starting with the organization's friends and people who are more likely to say yes, board members, current donors, and such. And mission controllers, they're fine with friends, actually friends and family, but they're going to look at it methodically as opposed to casting the net broadly, right? So the rainmaker is very strategic, looking at top dollar prospects and such. The go-getter casts the net wide. The kindred spirit avoids those they know best and goes for the lower hanging fruit. And the mission controllers systematically look at friends and family. And I say technical cases because when we get to more sophisticated gifts or to family foundations, or even bringing in your board members when you're going to see a foundation or a corporation, uh, the mission controllers understand that framework, the timelines, the requests for proposals and things like that, and often work better in those frameworks. And then we look at this analytic and intuitive dichotomy because, as I mentioned earlier, if you're an analytic and you're talking to an analytic donor, you're talking the same language to begin with, and that has a great benefit. And the same for the intuitives. So, and we could talk an awful lot about prospects, of course, but this is just to give you a guide to say there is a lens through which we look at our donors, either in terms of who we are most comfortable soliciting and will go solicit, or how we deal with all our donors, because we have these 25 people we have to see. They're not all exactly the personality I get along with best. How do I deal with someone who is that way? And I will share, as a true kindred spirit, I find rainmaker donors the hardest still. After thousands of meetings, I still get nervous. And rainmakers ask these very specific strategic questions and these questions about outcomes. And I, as a kindred spirit, am not that analytic about things, right? I love an organization because I love it, because my gut tells me they're doing great work. I see it and I believe it. And then the rainmaker comes in and says, and asks these questions. So the second piece here, really important, is making the case. What's a case for support, right? It's really a story, your story. And I believe that you're the most important person in the story. Because if what you say in talking about your organization is authentic to who you are, and it's something you can say passionately, it's going to be compelling to the listener, the donor. I don't believe you have to tell the donor what the donor wants to hear. We often don't know what that is. We don't want to give board members some elevator pitch and tell everyone to say the same exact thing because it won't sound passionate or authentic, right? We want to tell our own story based on vision and impact. These to me are best practice. It's easier to talk about need. It's easier to talk about the features of our organization. We have 3 residential quads, we have 4 wet labs, we have 2 state theater, we have a main stage, and we have an experimental stage and such. But what really sells is story, and is this vision and impact, helping your donors understand your vision and your organization's vision for the future if your work gets done, and the impact you will have. Because each of us asks a different question as we're trying to figure out what's important to us about our organization. It means we're going to use different vocabularies to tell different stories. I, as a kindred spirit, will no more tell a goal story than a rainmaker will tell a warm and fuzzy heart story. Right? A go-getter is the best, actually, at talking in a visionary, let's take advantage of the opportunity way. And a mission controller is great at using our plans and systems to describe how we're going to make an impact and fulfill our vision. We're all trying to say that. This is how we make an impact and fulfill our vision, but we all do it differently. And as I said, that means no elevator pitches, and it means practice. So another exercise is this one, and we will see. I'd like you all to type in the chat box. Complete this sentence. If my organization is successful, blank. What would you say? There will be no poverty. We will eradicate polio. No child will be left unfed. Uh, Criminal recidivism will decrease by 50%. What will happen if your organization is successful? And I ask you to type that in, and because yes, there's a vision that the organization has, but we're all going to speak about it in a different way based on our style. Jessica will lessen the gap between the cost of care provided and insurance reimbursement, which would be extraordinary. And I would say I would take that even further. And what would that mean? Because we know that obviously medical care and insurance have become a huge issue in terms of the cost to most people, right? And how that impacts their lives and keeps them from having insurance or being able to otherwise take care of themselves and their families, right? Christian visitors will understand the values of I'm actually going to use my reading glasses for this. Seeing dinosaur fossils in situ, scientific discovery and advancement, right? And that will give them more of an appreciation of history and future and how we are, where we are in evolution. Paul, a difference that will live on expressing their values, right? And often putting it in the voice of our donors is important. But having our own story is important because our donors want to understand our story as much as we need to understand theirs. So thank you for typing those in, and some of you may still be working on them. Please do and share them with us. Then we come to the setting up the meeting. So I had a conversation about this again just 2 days ago. I was talking to a dear friend of mine and peer who does a lot of plan giving work, and he calls everyone. And he's an extrovert, and he's actually going to present some of my slides next week on a presentation of his own. And and he still was thinking, even after all these years, well, there are other things introverts can do, meaning since they can't call, they won't be raising money. And I said to him, what percentage of your calls get answered? He said 20%. I said, okay, so what's happening to the other 80%? And have you ever thought of the fact that 50% of your donors, more or less, are going to be introverts and probably will not answer your phone call? I will not answer a phone call from a charity. I don't like answering phone calls from almost anyone. So who said you have to call? Now, 40 years ago, when I've been in this business 40 years and 2 months. I started in April 1985, and all we had was phone. But a few years, and I didn't like it, but a few years later, we had email, which made all the difference because for me, I'm much more comfortable communicating in writing. Now, of course, the end goal is to see your donor in person. Now it could be video chat, but when I'm setting up a meeting, I don't have to call to set up a meeting. I should do it, all things equal, in the way that works best for me. Now, if you're a very sophisticated fundraiser, and if you know your donor and you know your donor loves when you call, that might be different because you know you're going to get a happy voice on the other end of the line. But if you don't know, right, all things equal, do it the way that works best for you. Particularly important for board members. I write beautiful correspondence. I love the written word. It's why Jay mentioned I've written 4 books. That's why I've written 4 books. I'm going to be working on 2 more. I love writing. And I can write compelling emails, stories, engage my donors, not only set up meetings that way, but really correspond with them and keep them in the loop that way. Each of us, based on our style, is going to be more or less comfortable and more or less effective with various forms of communication. And we should honor ourselves to the extent we can. Now, if a donor will only speak to you by phone, you have to call. But for most of us today, actually, the phone has become a little challenging because everyone has a cell phone. Very few people have a landline, except much older people, right? I mean, most people these days, I think under 50 don't have one anymore. And it's not like it used to be anyway in terms of getting in touch with people. So important to keep that in mind when setting up the meeting and in all correspondence based on your asking style. So now we get to having these intentional conversations when we're cultivating, educating, maybe asking for a gift. And I wish we had tons of time for this one, but it's just one piece. Along with the asking styles framework, we developed, and actually Andrea did herself, the arc of the ask, a framework for walking through any conversation. Because in every conversation, we're asking for something. We're trying to move the relationship ahead. If we're meeting with a donor, we might be asking whether they would come for a site visit or open a door to someone else, or whether we can send them more information, or there's always some sort of ask. We can't walk through the whole arc today, but if you're interested in diving in deeper, I do webinars on my platform and others. And if you follow me on LinkedIn or you go to Asking Matters, you can find out about that and find out and I can share that with you and do trainings. But I want to cover just a few quick items here. We start any meeting by settling. We've, let's say we're meeting at a restaurant. We come to the restaurant, we've been hustling out to get there. We're probably looking at our phones while we're sitting down. We have to put our phones away and we have to start interacting with each other and asking personal questions and getting, just getting up to speed and getting in a rhythm. And our asking style impacts us right then and there. I, as an introvert, find it more difficult to start a meeting than an extrovert. And I've learned over the years to write down in advance a couple of questions that I want to ask my donor, personal questions. How's your work going? How's the family? Something based on what I remember or what I know about them. I find that helpful, whereas the extroverts can probably just walk into the meeting, sit down, and comfortably start that conversation. Now I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to go past confirmation and exploration and to the story and then asking for a gift. Because there comes a point where we say, thank you for meeting with me. And I love this organization because this is what we're trying to accomplish. And we do such a great job and we're having these impacts. And would you consider a gift? And in fact, so each of us makes that pitch based on our style, and each of us has a challenge, I should say, at this point in the meeting. Rainmakers aren't big on process, so they're going to want to get to this point sooner. Go-getters are going to, if they're generally not even remember I'm supposed to move the meeting ahead because they're so in the moment. And I love go-getters, all of you online, for being in that moment when you really need to move on. Kindred spirits, we're anxious about it. Oh no, here's where the rubber hits the road and I have to negotiate and it might feel confrontational to me, so I'm going to wait. And the mission controller says, well, I saw the framework and it says ask 50% of the way through the meeting and we're 30 minutes into an hour, so it's time to ask. We all actually have a challenge at this moment and we all have to, and just by knowing it and addressing it, we can have a better meeting because we have to ask in the middle in order to have time afterwards to explore further, right? So we explore before what's your relationship, how do you first come to know us, what do you like most about what we're doing, and afterwards, when someone responds to our request, we want to find out more about that response, unless it's a clear-cut yes. And what's the next thing we have to do after we ask? We have to be quiet. Would you consider a gift of X amount? And then we're quiet. Well, type in the chat box, which fundraiser is going to have the easiest time being quiet after asking for a gift? Who do you think? Which fundraiser will find it easier to ask for the gift and then be quiet until the donor speaks? Kindred, Mission Control, Mission Control. Um, oh, is the ask really a question or isn't it? Let's do this. Interesting. I do think it's a question. Kindred, Kindred, Kindred. So there's no data on this, but I have been eating, sleeping, breathing these styles for almost 15 years now. And I think it will be easiest for the mission controller. I see it as easiest because they like the system. They know it's time to be quiet and they like to sit back and observe. Hardest for the go-getter who will find the quiet really difficult and will go on to fill that silence. A little easier for the kindred spirit who will be relieved but might go on due to nervousness, and a little challenging for the rainmaker who will want to keep selling and add facts, but is strategic and says, no, no, I know I can't do that. So each step of the way, who we are is impacting the rhythm of the meeting and how we respond. And the more we're aware of that, the stronger we can be because we can learn from that and then conduct better meetings. Last, boards and asking styles. So our boards are made up of a bunch of people who each have a different style. Whenever I train, I have the entire board take the quiz beforehand, report back their primary and secondaries, and then I map them out on just, two axes. You can just do this on a piece of paper or on a flip chart or something. And then we discuss, what does this mean about our board? And I've seen boards that are really skewed in one direction or another. And the question is, how is that impacting things? And how would that change if just two board members were in a different quadrant? Right now, you're looking at almost the same grid, but it has a very different feel. Many more introverts, better balance between analytics and intuitives, right? How does that impact your meetings? How does that impact who speaks? I always say, the person at the very end, when the board chair says, does anyone else have anything to say? Someone raises their hand, and it's usually an introvert who let everyone else speak and then has something to say. So is the board chair making sure everyone in the room is speaking? How do you make sure everyone's voice is heard, since you have people who speak more freely and more often and people who don't in the room? And how is that even more impacted by today, where so much of this is by video chat? I was in a board session. The board chair had asked everyone to raise their hands if they had something to say, put up that little yellow hand. And and but people were jumping in and jumping in. And finally, the board chair said, anyone else? And this one board member said, yes, I've had my hand up forever waiting to be called on. She was an introvert. She wasn't going to interrupt. So we need to really be sure of every voice being heard, and the dynamic of introverts and extroverts in the meeting. Also, to look at it even through strategic planning. right? If everyone is in one quadrant or another, you may not have a fully fledged strategic plan. I worked with an organization where they had tons of mission controllers. And when I read the plan, I felt that it was really structured and systematic, and there was no question they could accomplish it. But I felt that maybe they didn't push far enough, and that maybe there wasn't a go-getter with a bigger vision to say, how about if we push even harder? It was so focused on that. So again, and one or two of you might have answered this already. I'm not going to ask you to answer it today, but a very important dichotomy in your organization or in relationship is between the executive director, CEO, and the board chair. You might be one of them, right? We have EDs on today, or you might be a director of development trying to work with both of those. What are their styles? How does that impact how they work together, how you work together? And what have you learned from this that might help you respect each other more, support each other more, and so forth? So that is a quick overview of the styles and various ways in which they impact your team, how you go about your fundraising, what your strengths are, and what your challenges are. The number one next step is the quiz. I encourage every one of you to take it and to have everyone else on your team take it. Most people really enjoy these. I think that the asking styles, of course, I'm biased, but I think they're particularly accessible because we have these wonderful names for them, and it just becomes so visually clear as to who we are. And you will learn an awful lot about each other from doing this, and it will strengthen your work. So, takeaways and questions. I'd love if you could type in at the same time, if you have a question for me, please share it now. And I'd love everyone at the same time to share what's your number one takeaway from today. We've had almost 50 minutes together. What is the number one thing you're going to remember, try to apply leaving today?
And Brian, before
Yes.
you jump into the questions and the answers, could you also pull down the slides so people can see you as you're doing that? And I also want to just let people know what's coming up in the series. So this is a great moment to go ahead and pose your questions or your comments right in the chat or in the Q&A. But Brian, if you wouldn't mind, just a little advert for what's next week. Coming up next in the Philanthropy Mastermind series, first of all, this Friday night on the PM podcast, we're shining a spotlight on the next generation of fundraising leaders, many of those who were at the AFP Icon Conference. So don't miss our conversation with Abby Trahan, who's development officer at the University of Houston, and Brian Marquez Hall, who's development officer at Southern Scholarship Foundation. They were both named AFP's Outstanding Young Professionals of 2025. So we'll talk with them about their journeys, fresh from the conversations at Icon. Then on Tuesday, you can join us live for a conversation we just programmed yesterday, and it's really on the top of the headlines. First is about the cancellation of Microsoft's premium Office grants. And we're going to be talking about that with George Weiner, who's been leading a campaign to see if Microsoft will reconsider that action. And then later in the program, we have Harvey McKinnon, the legendary fundraising strategist, who will talk about what he has done in terms of leading a campaign to save CBC radio and what lessons that holds for defending or critical resources for PBS and NPR here in the United States. And then finally, next Thursday in this show, How to Raise, we'll have Hardy Smith talking about getting commitment for board member fundraising. It'll be a great companion piece to everything that you've been sharing today, Brian.
Wonderful. That's great. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your takeaways. We share a lot of information in these webinars, and no one can remember it all. It's like talking to a donor and what do they remember? But to take away at least one or two top things is great. Let me close my part before turning it back to Jay by thanking you all, not only for attending and thinking maybe I had something to say that would be helpful, but really for being in our world. I am so lucky to have spent my whole career in the nonprofit world with really great people who put mission first and really want to make a difference in the world rather than, buy the new Maserati or whatever the heck it is. And we've lived in very consumeristic times, you could say, and here we are doing the work. And I appreciate it so much and feel so lucky because I just am always with great people. So thank you.
Beautiful sentiment. And there are some lovely takeaways from this session
Yeah,
already.
they're great.
You can see here from Nettie and Clayton, and I'm sure others have have some thoughts as well. But if you have questions or additional comments, this is a perfect time before, Brian, you sail off. And as people are listing those, you did reference where people can find out more, both from your books, but also some of the sessions you do. Do you have anything coming up that people should be aware of?
Do I have anything coming up? Well, the big thing is I have this product called Board Fundraising Pro. I'm spending a lot of time on boards these days, and I've created this product that helps me train your board throughout the year, so that you don't have to do the work and it's also much more reasonable. It's called, and if you go to boards.askingmatters.com, you'll find that. And that, because we all struggle with boards and we need them to help fundraise more than ever now. And that might be really the place where I can help you the most. So I,
And I know you and I have talked about that a lot in the past, and the power, among other things, of listening to people, which you started this whole conversation with today. And we've talked about that a lot. There's one last thing note for people who are here with us live, which is that we don't have a way of hearing you in these settings aside from the chat and the Q&A. But there is one more thing, which is you'll see a little survey as you roll off the session today. And I would really ask that you please just take a minute. It won't take you any more than that to complete that survey, not only to let us know what you thought about the content today, but what you'd like to see in the future. So please do fill that out. Let us know what you want to see in here so we can program it, because we are programming the entirety of the fall, 3 sessions per week built around you. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to listen to what you have to say, and that's one way we can do it. Thank
okay.
you so much, Brian. I really appreciate your being here and sharing again. You can find out more about Brian's work right there. You can see a link in the chat, or you can just type in askingmatters.com and learn all about it. But I would encourage you to not only do that and to follow his work, but to get those books, because I know sometimes with these board trainings or discussions internally, it's also really helpful to have the book in your hand so you can really facilitate a conversation about how people can make these kinds of adjustments to the way they do the work.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Brian.
having me on, Jay.
Okay, it's good to see you.
Have a great day, everyone.